Today we're going to be looking at a poem by Langston Hughes, and we are going to be doing something called analyzing a poem. When you analyze a poem, you're not just reading it and going, oh, okay, I finished the poem. You're actually reading it and trying to figure out what the author is trying to tell you, what kind of a message the author is trying to bring across. So there's a certain way to go about reading a poem to analyze it and understand it. So I want to walk through this with you. Number one says we need to observe the poem. Well, that means we need to figure it out. Is it short? Is it long? Does it have pictures that go with it? What stands out to you as you look it over? Sometimes a poem is super, super short. Sometimes it's really long. Sometimes the pictures are next to the poem. Sometimes the poem itself makes a picture. You need to look at it and just say, oh, okay, this is what I notice about this poem. Number two, using a Post-it, or if your teacher allows you, write all of your thoughts down on the poem as you navigate through. You have the poems written, you will have the poems written in your journal. Yesterday you wrote down Dreams by Langston Hughes, and that's the one we're using today. So I'm going to go with this second idea. I want you to write things down as you read through our poems. Your page is not just going to have a poem on it. You might have pictures, you might have thoughts, you might write down something that you thought of that goes along with the poem. All sorts of things can be written down as you go through poems. Okay? The third thing we're going to do, we're going to make connections. We're going to make connections to the title. Text to self, text to text, or text to world. If you're making a text to self connection, that means you're reading the title of the poem and saying, oh, I remember when I did something, or I have a connection to that title. Text to text is whenever you read the title of a poem, you're going, oh, I remember when I read another thing that was like this. You read something else, another text. Or text to world would be, oh, this one time we were at the park and I saw a similar thing. Or I was watching the news and this happened. Okay, so this is text to world. So far, we know that we're going to look at the poem and see what stands out. We know we're going to be writing all sorts of things down on our page as we read through the poems. We're going to be making connections. Those are all things that we're going to do before we ever read the poem. Number 4 is read the poem. Number 5, what jumps out at you during and after this read? Those are the things you need to write down in your journal. Whenever you're reading and you think, whoa, what was that? Or, oh my gosh, that was cool. Those are things that you need to write down in your journal. What jumped out at you? And then number 6, there's my cursor. Number 6, going line by line, think about what the poet or speaker or narrator of the poem is trying to communicate and determine the main idea. This part is extremely important, guys. Sometimes we have to stop after each line and say, what was the poet thinking? What were they trying to get me to understand? Because they use different types of language in poems than we normally use in our everyday reading. Poetry is just a little bit different. Okay? Then we're going to identify poetic devices. You're going to learn about poetic devices next. And then you reread as many times as you need to in order to make sense of the poem. So read it until you're like, oh, I get it. I understand what they're saying now. Those are the things that we do when we are analyzing a poem. This is in your class kick. You're looking at that page hopefully now as I read these to you and go over them. But we are going to analyze a poem. And today you're going to do that with Langston Hughes' Dreams. And there is a video lesson to go along with that walks you through the 3 things that I'd like you to concentrate on today. So make sure you watch the video on your next slide. Here we go. Let's jump into poetry.